Excellent. So yeah, let's kick on. Hi everybody, welcome to today's webinar. Thanks for joining us. Today's session we're going to be focusing on how G-Cloud 15 is upon us and how to submit a winning application and secure more awards on this renewed framework. So we know it's a very busy time coming into the end of this year, so we're going to keep this session punchy and informative. You're going to hear from 3 speakers, including myself, and we're going to follow that by a live Q&A, so do stick around. We're going to share a QR code shortly on the screen, so you can scan it with your phone camera and drop in any questions anytime during the session, and then we'll get to it at the end. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Delon Ryan. I am the Data and Research Manager at Stottles. My role really is all about translating this, the various public sector procurement data into actionable insights for our customers and for our internal teams. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Chris Farthing, who's the CEO of Advice Cloud, and Anna Campbell, who's Head of Customer Engagement at Cloud Essentials. And I guess I'll stop there for a moment, and I'm going to pass over to Chris and Anna to introduce themselves. So, Chris, if I can bring you in first.
Thanks, Dylan. Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Farthing. I'm the founder and CEO of Advice Cloud. We're a procurement specialist organisation. I'm also a former government buyer, but please don't hold that against me. We've been working for about 11 years now, working with buyers, helping them buy cloud and digital services, but also in the main working with suppliers, helping them understand how government buys stuff and then providing ways of overcoming procurement, really, and helping you sell better into Gov. Working with G-Cloud as a buyer since version 1 and then with suppliers since version 5. So delighted to be here. Thanks very much for asking me.
Fantastic. And Anna?
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Stoffel, for having me along. Just to kind of introduce Climate Essentials a little bit, Climate Essentials provides carbon management and reporting platform and support to a range of organisations, everything from kind of B2B in terms of supporting mandatory and voluntary carbon reporting and decarbonisation, and then also into kind of large-scale supply chain decarbonisation for our work with enterprise and public sector. So all about supporting the transition to net zero, making sure you've got the right tools, education, and resources within the organisation. My experience in G-Cloud, we've been part of the 2 previous frameworks, and so we're currently in prep mode for G-Cloud 15. So I'm kind of sharing the experience that we've got so far and kind of talking through some of the challenges as well.
Fantastic. So Chris and Anna will be back to join us in the fireside chat for the Q&A. Chris having a real boots on the ground view of supporting suppliers who have gotten onto these frameworks and have won awards, and then Anna, who from a supplier angle has won awards on G-Cloud 14, for example. So they'll both be talking through their experience and providing some essential recommendations as we I guess flow towards G-Cloud 15 and the end of G-Cloud 14. So let's kick on. So if this is your first time joining a Stottles webinar and you don't know about us, we are the single AI platform to grow your public sector business. We are UK based. We're a venture-backed company. We're about 60 people in the company right now, and we're headquartered near the Barbican in London. Our mission is quite simple. We want to help suppliers identify, qualify, nurture, and win more public sector business faster. We bring millions of structured and unstructured data points across hundreds of sources all into one place, so that suppliers can create their strategy, build their pipeline, track tenders, and win bids. And working closely with suppliers has given us a really unique lens into what's working and what's not in public sector sales. And I'm sure everyone in the room today has tools from all over the place. Really, we're trying to move away from these disjointed tools into a single source of truth. And that's really what we are trying to do in the UK public sector. So today's session, it's all about practical insights for getting onto G-Cloud 15 and how to make the most of it when you do. We have 4 key points here that we're going to aim to wrap by the end of the session, which is to grasp what the key changes are, and what they mean for you, to size and prioritize your G-Cloud 15 opportunity using CCS spend data provided by Advice Cloud and our own collected notice and framework awards data. We want to show you how to craft listings that are easily findable and that score highly, and then turn the remaining time on G-Cloud 14 into extra wins before it expires next year. The agenda is quite simple. Section 1, I'm going to walk through what's changing and why it matters. Section 2, where to focus and grow your revenue on G-Cloud 14 and 15. Section 3 will be the fireside chat with Advice Cloud and Climate Essentials. And then finally, we'll have the Q&A with I guess the three of us on the call today. As I mentioned previously, we do have Slido running. So if you have your phones, you can get them out and we can jump into the first, I guess, polling question to sort of take a temperature of who's in the room. And you can use this also to drop in questions anytime for the panel and we can answer during the Q&A. So if you scan the QR code there or go onto slido.com and enter in the code below, feel free to answer this first question that we have on the board. So where are you in your G-Cloud 15 journey? And this really helps us shape, I guess, how we approach some of the prompts we have later on in the fireside chat. 20, nearly 30 people have answered so far. It seems like suppliers are in the middle of drafting their G-Cloud 15 submission. Some are planning. Some are unsure whether they want to apply as well. But it's sort of good to see that those in the room are not just still focused on G-Cloud 14 only. So I'll give it another minute or two, and then I'll move on to the next question. Okay, it seems like most people here are either actively drafting or planning, so this is a really good stage to be in. If we move on to the next one, I guess we want to, once again, take a temperature, see how people are feeling with regard to emotions. So what emoji best describes your readiness for G-Cloud 15? So whether you're in your drafting mode or in your planning mode, we're seeing face palm, we're seeing some exploding heads. Seeing no excited faces yet, but yeah, range of emotions. It's always an interesting question to ask, depending on the topic. Okay, real mix. Cold sweat, head scratching, observing, fine, mind-boggling. Right, I think this like sort of helps us helps us frame our fireside chat later, and we can hopefully support some suppliers on the call with any questions they have. So with all that said, do feel free to drop in any questions you have as we go along, and we'll pick up on them in about 20-25 minutes. So let's kick off with the first section. So G-Cloud has been around for more than a decade, as Chris mentioned at the top of the call. But G-Cloud 15 is not just the next version. It's the first framework under the new Procurement Act. It also folds in the Cloud Compute Framework, and really means there are going to be three things will be changing that will really matter to suppliers. So how you get on the framework, how you stay on and keep it current, then how buyers actually use it to run real competitions. Once we have that picture, we're going to look at the data and see what it says about where the money is, who's winning. But first, let's take a peek at the timing and structure. So G-Cloud 15 is now open for submissions. Some are drafting, some are planning, but the application window will close on the 30th of January 2026. It might seem like a while away for those still in planning mode, but if you have multiple services, internal approvals and partners to coordinate with, this window will close very quickly. Our fireside chat will discuss, I guess, really what to be doing over the next 2 months. Stick around to hear about this. And I guess the image here on the right-hand side is just a snapshot of gcloud 15's open tender on the Stuff platform, which we pull through from the public portals. So on this slide, we've noted 5 of the, I guess, key changes that we've been getting feedback on that suppliers are looking at. So I mentioned it before, gcloud 15 is a 4-year open framework. It's going to be running for 4 years under the Procurement Act rather than the 18 months plus extension model that you're used to in previous iterations. It's also an open framework, so CCS can reopen it at planned points, roughly halfway, and then later on as well to let new suppliers in and let existing suppliers refresh services and pricing. The call-off contracts on this new iteration can run longer than the framework term. For example, in the infrastructure lots, initial periods can be up to 5 years with possible extensions, where in the software and support lots, initial periods can be 4 years, again, with possible extensions as well. So if you get on early, you have more time on the pitch, more visibility, more call-offs, and more scope to secure long-term contracts that continue beyond the end of gcloud 15. However, if you come later at a reopening, you have less time to build this pipeline. So I guess it's really about getting yourself ready for this first window and getting in from the bars early so that you're ready and there. Second point on know your lot, gcloud 15 moves from the old 3+1 lot structure to 5 clearly defined lots. So 1A being an infrastructure as a service and platform as a service lot, 1B similarly with above official definition, Lot 2A, focus on infrastructure software, 2B on software as a service, and then Lot 3 on cloud support services. So more defined, a little bit different. But gcloud 15, as mentioned before, is also absorbing cloud compute services that previously sat on a separate framework and then removes the old Lot 4 support with competition concept as well. So what this means, whatever lot you do decide to get on will dictate which buyers will realistically see you in your searches, what technical evidence, security, resilience you must show, and then what call-off durations and contract types you typically see as well. So misplacing a service in the wrong lot will be detrimental to how you get found and your public sector wins, in essence. Third here, win on score, not access. So under the Procurement Act, gcloud 15 moves to a more traditional CCS model where quality, price, and social value will all be evaluated at the framework award. What this means is that your framework score is no longer just a gateway. Buyers can see who have already met quality, price, and social value thresholds and may use these to score and shortlist the awards. So you should really treat this framework submission like a real competition, not just a formality. So invest in a strong, specific submission on quality and social value and not just compliant ones as well. But we'll get into this a little bit more in the fireside chat. Next, on credentials. So the recommendation is to sort your credentials early. gcloud 15 brings in more Procurement Act metrics and brings in procurement policy notes into early entry requirements. And CCS will look for things like carbon reduction plans, cyber essentials and cyber essentials plus, and then alignment with sustainability and social value guidance, among other criteria as well. What this means is that many of these checks operate as hard gates or risk filters. So if prompt payment, cyber certification, or your carbon plans are not in the place at submission, you can't simply fix it later without risking exclusion. So it's really important to create this strategy at the get-go, well ahead of time, which is why starting early and starting now is important to be successful by the time January 30th comes along. And then the final point here, just on preparing for real competitions. So under G-Cloud 14, buyers mostly used direct award for lots 1, 2, and 3 and ran competitions mainly through lot 4. However, on G-Cloud 15, all 5 lots can be used with or without competition. So the Procurement Act brought in 2 main procedures, the open procedure and then the competitive flexible procedure, which lets buyers design multi-stage, fit for purpose competitions inside frameworks. So, you need listings that work for competition as well as direct award, clear scope, pricing, and outcomes to make it easier for buyers to build a fair competition that still fits with what you do. So that's just a quick rundown there. And I guess to wrap up this first section, in a nutshell, getting on is harder. You're going to need stronger evidence on quality, social value, finances, and compliance. Winning work is more bid-like. There are more mini competitions. At call-offs, you need a repeatable response engine, not just a decent catalog listing. And then positioning matters more as well. So the finer lot structure and social value focus rewards customers and suppliers who are clear on where they play and why they create outcomes, not just the features that they offer. So we recently published a report, you can see a screenshot of on the right-hand side, where we, I guess took a very outcome-focused angle to figure out what the most important changes are for suppliers between 14 and 15, and then used the CCS data supplied by Advice Cloud and our own data to, I guess, help position the winners, the losers, the lots, and the expiries that will be coming down the line for suppliers to get ahead of the game. So my colleague Zav will drop a link into the chat. Do feel free to click through in your own time and have a look at that. The second section I just want to get into here is really turning the theory that I covered in the first part into, I guess, a more data-driven look at how to create a winning G-Cloud strategy. So the questions are like, how big is the G-Cloud market overall? Which buyers and suppliers are really driving this spend? And when is the opportunity actually coming to market? So if we look at the first slide here, you can see G-Cloud spend by year is increasing. And this is based on, as I mentioned, the CCS spend data provided by Advice Cloud. The pattern is quite clear. Spend is climbing significantly since 2006, 2016, 2017, with a real jump during the pandemic years as people opted for more cloud-based infrastructure and software. The 3 takeaways here. G-Cloud is a very material route to market, not just a side channel. Growth is driven by a relatively concentrated set of buyers and suppliers. It's not evenly spread across the entire market, similar with lots. And then if you're serious about public sector spend, especially in cloud, you need a clear G-Cloud position, even if you're also active across other frameworks and other routes as well. Second slide shows the top G-Cloud 14 buyers by evidence spend. So the departments like the DWP, the MOD, the MOJ, the Home Office obviously sit at the top as the largest buyers here. But it's interesting that not every large public body uses G-Cloud the same way. Some might be heavy users, some barely touch it, and even within the heavy users, only a subset will be a strong fit for what you sell. So the move here is to define a short list of priority buyers for G-Cloud 15 that might include current customers who are already buying through G-Cloud, or else a handful of lookalike organizations who buy similar services through the same lots. Here we look at the top G-Cloud 14 suppliers by spend. And you can see big names that you would expect, large integrators, major value-added resellers, Microsoft, AWS, etc. If you look more closely, you can also see some challengers like like Hunter Healthcare, for example, version 1, GraphNet, who also are climbing this table since GCAD 14 kicked off. And this tells us two things. Yes, the big integrators and VARs dominate a lot of this. However, there is still space for specialist suppliers with a clear value story and focused buyer set. So I guess one anecdote from working with smaller suppliers is that those who break through tend to nail the basics on their listings early, with clear service definitions, clear pricing, and strong outcomes language. And this is something that both Chris and Anna will talk to during the fireside chat. This chart here shows the volume of new awards activity over time since Q2 2022. You can see spikes, but they line up with the budget cycles, not just with contract end dates. So if your entire strategy is just watch out for the end dates and call the bar 3 months before, you will probably miss a trick here and a lot of the real decision points. So a better plan is to map the financial year and major programs for each priority bar. Use that to plan your outreach and marketing activity, and then stay close to budget setting, strategy updates, and business cases as well. A lot of documents out there. We have our documents feature in Stottles, but lot to go through. And yeah, that's one buyer signal that you should definitely keep an eye on. The final slide I'm going to share before the fireside chat is just a look at a small analysis I ran on confirmed reprocurements coming to market over the next 2 years. So what I did here was had a look at a number of previous iterations of G-Cloud to see how many call-offs or contracts were reprocured more than once. And just looking at, I think, around 40 that we have confirmed coming up over the next year and a half, 2 years, you can see here that while the volume is highest in Q1 2026, the value jumps just after the budget renewal window of the financial year in Q2 2026. So, I guess there's two ways to look at this. First, you can prioritize. So if you hold one of these contracts, you know roughly when the reprocurement risk hits, and this lets you plan retention work and renewals in advance. Otherwise, you can hunt if a rival holds the current contract, for example. This is your window to position yourself as the credible alternative. But yeah, okay. That's the end there of the the two sections teeing up the fireside chat. So I'm going to ask both Chris and Anna to pop back in now. And I guess I'm going to pass over to Anna first, who will give a bit of rundown of who Climate Essentials are and a bit more about her role. And then we can pass over to Chris and kick off the fireside chat. So Anna, I'll pass over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So yeah, just to kind of talk a little bit more about Climate Essentials, what we do and what we're all about. So at Climate Essentials, our mission is basically to provide the tools and expertise to support businesses of any size and sector to navigate whatever the net zero transition looks like. So predominantly that is through carbon accounting and reporting support alongside reduction planning software. We work with predominantly SMEs, so we've geared our solution to work with audiences that perhaps don't have a close familiarity with all of the technical jargon that comes with this space. We very early on kind of identified that was a significant barrier to tapping into the advantages that having this kind of thought out, both from a commercial but also operational perspective, can offer. So our software solution helps to tackle that from a business perspective. And we also, our work, the reason we're in this conversation around G-Cloud and supplying to the public sector is our work also expands to supporting large-scale decarbonisation. So be that through cities and regions and mapping potential decarbonisation opportunities and things like that, but also kind of looking within those organisations and supporting the decarbonisation through the supply chain. So ironically, I'm kind of both experiencing the impact of that kind of trickling through, but also supporting it from the other side. So that's hopefully a little bit about Climate Essentials, and my role is essentially just to kind of not just get our name out there, but maximize the benefits of working with our technology and working with our teams on the educational side, and kind of supporting the upskilling and confidence of the organizations that we work with in this subject matter.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Anna. Chris, we'll bring you in now.
Brilliant. Okay, so as I said, we're a public sector procurement specialist. So, we're having worked with various departments, health board, health trusts, regulatory, the policing, local government over a relatively long career. Our services from supply side have evolved over the past. First of all, it was really about getting people onto frameworks. Those are the biggest barriers we found for our suppliers, especially SMEs. One of our purpose and passion is really working with SMEs. We do have a number of the large organisations we work with. Most of the global systems integrators and 2 of the big 4 work with us. So we do offer. So we've got our real passion does work with working with SMEs. So it's about helping organisations understand what their service offers to government, and maybe finding some correct target areas for them to focus on, identifying the blockers that will help them trade, and we call that making people buyable. So that could be getting on a procurement framework, it could be down to having your carbon reduction plan in place and understanding your various social value areas and the strategy that you're going to need to have, how well you bid, what ISOs you're going to need, any other accreditations. And we have a fairly good ecosystem working with the likes of Stottles and others to help. Having been doing this for 11 years now, we kind of understand a lot of the various different pain points over that growth journey, and there are times when we can introduce people in there. So there's things about training and workshops as to how to bid better or how to write bids, getting onto frameworks. And we're the only UK company that provides framework applications actually guaranteed to get you on and get your money back. We've done this on a 98.5% track record, actually. And let me tell you now, that 1.5% really vexes me. And that was one particular framework that CCS launched that we dropped a couple of lots on, and we took the hit on that. With help with go-to-market assessments, we have a phone a friend support, which is called Procurement Plus. Why would you want to have pay fairly expensive procurement knowledge in-house when you can just pick up the phone and ask us those questions? And then 50% of our work is now is on bidding. So doing the whole life cycle of bidding, from pursuit and capture planning right through to writing and structuring your responses, reviewing pink and red team reviewing, doing some retrospective reviews on stuff, helping you improve your bid libraries, the use of the right technology. We're a Stockwell Silver partner in this, and we use their technology as well. So there are a whole plethora of stuff out there. Don't get me wrong. So we can provide that whole end-to-end procurement related journey, really, and helping you win good money.
Fantastic. Really delighted to have you both on. Really set yourselves up brilliantly there to answer a couple of my questions and a couple of the audience's questions, which I can see are flowing in. Cool. So the way we're going to set this up for people on the call is that we have 3 prompts here. I'm going to walk through and then dive straight into the Q&A. So I guess the first part of the 3 would be sort of, what does a good application look like? And I'll start with you, Chris. So with Advice Cloud, so look, when you look across the G Cloud applications that consistently score well, like what do they have in common? And I don't mean just they answered all the questions. I mean like the patterns in how they describe their services, how they are structuring pricing and evidencing value, for example.
So, I mean, from an actual application perspective, the scoring of applications is completely new ground. So it's the first time it's really happened. So, except for on Cloud Compute 1 and 2, which has been merged into Lot 1A and B. So you've got to understand from, again, this is just purely from an application perspective, the principles of public sector tendering still apply. You've got to understand the question, how it's scored. Yeah. And then really try and make sure you answer it. I cannot tell you the amount of times that I've received bids and my team received bids, and we've said, how do you get from A to B? And someone go, well, if you go to C, then over to J, and then come back here, you might end up at Y. Like, that's not the question we asked. So when you're doing your submissions for the questions, try to use facts and evidence. Okay, when writing your answers, try to avoid, and I call it marketing nonsense, but marketing definitely has a place in this. But having a trailblazing cloud service is utterly meaningless when you're coming to evaluate a response. You need to say why you believe your cloud service is trailblazing. What are the differentials? How it sets you up. All right. And again, a lot of this is mostly those application questions, mostly aimed at lots 1A and B. For all the rest of it, you need to make sure you've understood and answered all of the pass-fail questions and can meet the minimum requirements, and make sure your submission is as easy to read as possible. And we'll talk a little bit later on about the structure and what we see for the best people winning work. So I think that from a good actually applying and being successful in getting onto the framework, that would probably be my best top tips for that.
Nice. And then on the flip side, like some of those common traps, I guess sort of feeds into maybe what you mentioned there before, but like what are the most common traps you're seeing suppliers fall into when applying for G-Cloud?
I think then it does really start to come into the actual submission itself, the stuff that sits out on the catalogue. Okay, so not paying attention to the buying process. Your people will put a submission up, and it's a lot of stuff, but they're not actually looking at how a buyer will get to buy their service. Now, under the new regulations, it's going to be very different. In theory, in practice, and we're noticing a lot of this under the Procurement Act. Nothing's really changed, and I don't think that the having the further competition route in G-Cloud is going to change too much, because direct award, or as it's now known, AWOC, award without competition, but that will going to take a while to change that one as well. It's not really a great acronym. So direct award will still continue, and that is one of the reasons G-Cloud's become most popular. It was the driver for G-Cloud's popularity, and not all other frameworks have followed that model now and allowing that. So when you are putting on a submission, so you've got to remember it's a public-facing submission, so people can see what you've written. So anything that's missing information from what your service name is, how you describe your service, what your features and benefits are, that's the 260-word searchable text. Then looking at the filters. How is a buyer actually going to filter you down from 50,000 services, especially if you're a cloud migration services provider in lot 3? There's 13,000 services of those. How are you going to get that down? And that's what you need to really focus on, as well as having a decent technical brochure, also known as a service definition. That's not a marketing document. It's an actual, the buyer can evaluate your stuff offline. This is how the stuff works. Again, we talked about there is focus on pricing. Putting price on applications a no-no. You need to be fairly clear. I want to, as a buyer, I want to be able to evaluate your stuff offline, so that against maybe 3 or 4 others, I can go, okay, these guys, I'd ask them some questions to clarify, and then I can award. I suppose a couple of other traps we see would be not leaving enough time for submissions. You can always tell when people have started something really late. I think something like 25% of the applications for G14 that didn't make it were all started within the 25% of all applications didn't make it, and a large number of those started quite late. There's some data that the CCS published. It's about 1,000 companies didn't make it on. Flying solo, giving this to a junior, it's a team sport. You need to involve your company in this. There's a lot for a SaaS application. I think one of our customers, the lot 1 and 2, so for example, as well as SaaS, so it estimates about 15 to 20 working days to across the business to put a submission together. I mean, slight plug here, with us takes about 5 to 6, but that's that. Shameless plug, I should say. So you'll need operations, technical, security, commercial. You'll need to have some sign off there depending on the size of your organisation. So not having that as a team sport, or giving it to someone who hasn't got the power to go within your organisation and get that information is a problem. All right, and we've seen it a lot. And then just think it's a marketing exercise. So putting bland, meaningless drivel is not something that a buyer is going to really appreciate. And I've overlooked many, many submissions to stuff that may have met my requirements, but it's just meaningless stuff. You know, you come up in my search, okay, could be useful. Actually, no, you're not really telling me anything here. I think that's enough for the moment.
You hold something back, I guess, for people who reach out. Thanks. That was really interesting. And one of the things you mentioned was the publicly facing pages on G Cloud 14. I was flicking around some suppliers before this call today and went onto the Climate Essentials page and saw that it is really well built out. So Anna, it'd be good like to hear from your side, like just under 2 months now until the application window closes. And from doing the polling at the beginning of this call, we saw that some were in drafting mode, some were in planning mode. So, what should suppliers be doing this week and next? And then what would you prioritize if you were in their shoes?
Yeah, I mean, we are in their shoes as well. We're in the midst of it, and listening to Chris kind of highlight some of the pitfalls as well. I'm kind of smiling and nodding and going, "Yeah, we did that a little bit." So very much kind of learning from our own experience, and I'm sure we'd have been able to shortcut that process if we'd had Chris kind of sitting on our shoulder. But I think the next 2 months are very much the key stage in terms of kind of setting yourself up for success, and I think more so than in previous iterations of G Cloud because there are fewer opportunities to make changes and it's a longer framework. So you've got to really make sure that it's not just kind of, as Chris has mentioned already, it's not just about nailing the value proposition, it's also about nailing the technical elements, the operational elements, and the terms, and the pricing is so, so key. One of the things that we were really sensitive about was around divulging the right amount of information, enough that you are answering the questions and are giving the right kind of information to potential buyers, but also conscious that, as you said, you went on our page earlier and saw all of our information. And as part of our exercise to prepare, which is probably something I'd recommend that people do who are preparing at the moment, is we looked at our competitors on the framework and we looked at the documentation they were providing and things like that. And we took learnings from that in terms of how to present yourself in the right way, in a competitive way, and things like that. So I think there are elements of that that need to be kind of on the radar for organisations that are starting to prepare or in the midst of it as well. And I think in some ways it's much the same process as kind of engaging in a larger kind of bid or tender. So to echo some of the things that Chris has mentioned, it's not a solo activity. It's really got to be an amalgamation of the best bits from all over your organisation and demonstrating the competency against those requirements. So I think the first thing that we've done is familiarize yourself with the award criteria and the weighting, and make sure that you're gearing yourself up to address some of the bits will be familiar and some of the bits will be unfamiliar. So make sure that you're setting yourself up at this stage to address those unfamiliar elements. More so I think that'll sit for organizations in social value and carbon reduction plan elements for some suppliers. So get those wheels in motion earlier rather than later, I would say, so that actually what you're presenting is well prepared rather than something that you kind of, you enter a call off or a direct award or even a mini competition, and then you're kind of kicking yourself that you've put these things in your external profile that now you've got to kind of follow through on. So I think those elements alongside kind of, as I said earlier, striking the right balance between kind of providing the clarity of service and technologies, terms and pricing alongside kind of acknowledging that it's essentially your kind of public marketplace, your public shop window almost. So, many people will have access to this information. So just be conscious of kind of what you're sharing. And I think finally kind of making sure that what you're presenting has a kind of very low or zero assumed knowledge about you and your organization and things like that, because I think that's a stumbling block that we kind of came up against, is that actually that's a gap we should have closed out in our G-Cloud 14 submission.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the themes like I'm hearing, I guess, are like to keep the service definition like clear and outcome focused, bring in like people from around the organization, align pricing and listings like tightly, and really not to scramble at the end. It's going to reshare my screen here. I believe it's switched off. But great. Thanks so much for the answers to prompt there. I guess the second one here would be focused more on, okay, so you've got the listing. Now what? So I guess bringing Chris back in again. So I guess once a supplier has been awarded a place in G Cloud, what are the best things that they can do in the first 90 days to set themselves up for success?
Okay, so I'm going to take a bit of a controversial. I'm going to say that we need to, as soon as your submission has gone in, 8 months before it, that's when the work needs to start. Okay, because otherwise you just wasted 8 months. It's all about building the top of your funnel. Yeah, so working out what your target markets are, where you want to go and play, where your competitors or where your partners are. You still need to get out and do the work. So G Cloud is a very large catalog. Yeah, I mean, there's 40 odd thousand services on there, from 5,000 suppliers, and there's probably going to be, I suppose the jury's out whether the changes are going to make it harder to get on and less suppliers. But as far as I'm aware, there's still the same level of interest and probably more increased. I think ever since version 1, the issues that I've seen for people is thinking that it's an inbound lead generation thing. It's not. It's far from that. I've been on there for years. Come to me, so I've been on this framework 35 years. I've never had an inbound lead. It's just like it's not designed for that. Even CCS and GDS, when they had it, were very, very clear that don't use this for source of inbound leads. You might get one or two, you might get some if you're fairly unique. And that, good luck to you on that. You need to still have your well-constructed keywords and filters and things. But ultimately, you need to do the shoe level. You need to get out and meet people. You need to get out and put your value proposition around, or get some content that's getting people in on LinkedIn or whatever. So G Cloud should be viewed as very much the facilitator and door opener. So when you're having a conversation, you've got there to a buyer or potential buyer, and they're saying, okay, we like your stuff. Yeah, you look like you've got something there. How can we buy from you? You can quite easily just guide them to G Cloud. Yeah, providing they're happy to use it. Some aren't. You'll get some people still actually say, what's G Cloud? Usually a fairly junior person who's coming into a role, who's been around for 12 years. So, I suppose what I'm trying to say is that you still have to sell and you still have to do the business development work. Just because you put a lot of effort, time, money, and whatever into putting a decent listing on G Cloud, that's kind of like a very, very much small tip of the iceberg. So, having a strategy on how you're going to sell and how you're going to work, it could be a partner strategy where you're finding like-minded people that can take you in, but using the sales data, contracts data, and whatever. So, look, I know someone over there who's selling into home office. They're friendly enough to me and they're not competitive. They might help me introduce and take me in there. Or as well as, then developing your own business development plans out and saying, and this is going to be quite a lot for an SME. So, I think narrowing your focus down onto focus on a couple of particular areas rather than trying to go for whole of government can take a lot of the overwhelm out. And then I think, as I say, finding out who's buying from whom, when the contracts are expiring, if there's a relevant contract that you want to go and pitch for, understanding how you help solve those problems, and then you're starting to get in front of potential buyers and talk about the problems they've got and how you're going to solve it. Okay. And then, as I say, driving towards your G Cloud listing, and then you've sold on value rather than price, haven't you? Whilst also when the catalog's up and that, making sure you're looking at your competitors, maybe doing some keyword searches, seeing what they come up with and changing because you can change your submission. You can adjust your pricing then once it's live, and you can see what your others are up to as well. And as I say, building your network is very important, like-minded fellows, really very important. You might work in a market outside of public sector, but someone there who's working in areas you might want some hand holding and some advice and some entry into. So making friends is really, really important as well as what we found over the years. And I think that's about enough there, I think.
Thank you very much. I guess, yeah, you mentioned one thing, which was the expectation of whether you should be like proactive or reactive and treat the like frameworks as like a catalog for buyers as opposed to be like reaching out. Anna, I know from our conversations like prior to this webinar that you have some examples of like winning both in like a reactive manner but also in a proactive way as well. So hopefully maybe you can like talk us through your experience on G-Cloud.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Chris has actually touched on some of those elements. I mean, we've experienced them, but some of the things that he's highlighted there are very much part of what we've experienced. So we were on G-Cloud 13 and we were on 14, and this is the first year that we've been able to be procured through the framework. So we had to kind of highlight, I suppose, two examples. We had two quite different experiences, just to kind of talk through. And as you said, one was very proactive, and one was we got a lead, which was fantastic. That's the dream that probably doesn't happen very often, but it was great. So I think to kind of characterize it, we had one organization who we were in conversation with. We'd worked on network. We'd been evolving this proposition with the team for a few months, and then the conversation came to, okay, well, how do we buy from them? How can we procure you? And it was very much that we were working with a team in the sustainability department who had a very kind of low level of awareness of G-Cloud's framework and how to procure and things like that. So we were in the position where I was asking around in my network, asking for advice from people who were really well acquainted with being procured through G-Cloud, as to kind of how do we guide and inform that process and so on. So we were actually able to kind of come to that conversation somewhat as a kind of informed supplier rather than we're both a bit lost and in the dark and so on. So that was really helpful because we were able to kind of share how they could find us and things like this, and that's where kind of really knowing your search terms and what gets you to the top of the list in G-Cloud is really valuable. So that was part of that conversation, and then when we were approached directly by another buyer, it was actually from within the procurement team. So we had a very, very different experience because, as you can imagine, procurement teams should be the ones that know these frameworks inside out and so on. So that was very different in our experience, and it was completely kind of seamless. And we had the classic 2 or 3 meetings to kind of talk over some bits and points of clarification and things like that, and just kind of more specifically outline what the service was and how it would work with them and things like that, before we kind of then kind of formalised that award and the call went through. So we did have 2 quite different experiences, and I think that if we weren't proactive the proactivity is the approach that will deliver the best return. As Chris has mentioned, you can't kind of put your stuff out there and wait for the phone to ring. It's not going to work that way. But it's more about at the point at which you have a buyer who's bought into what you do and there's a good value match and things like that. It's a way of kind of streamlining that procurement process rather than just kind of you get an order form through and off we go. It's never going to be that.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it seems like you're both on the same page with regard to the proactive versus like reactive approach and different strategies once you have a listing. I guess in the interest of time, I'm just going to hop onto the final prompt and maybe ask, I guess, one question from here. We can open the Q&A because I can see a lot of questions coming in. I guess, let me see. I have one here. Yeah, I guess the question around maybe for both of you, maybe Chris first and then Anna. I guess SMEs versus larger suppliers, how to stay competitive on price. How can smaller companies compete against these larger suppliers on G Cloud? Chris, if you've any thoughts on that, would be great.
I think SMEs and mid-market organizations are very, very well placed to compete on price. I mean, if you're reselling Microsoft, then that's going to be based on volume discounts. Okay. So, it's a bit of a zero-sum game, to be honest. You need to pick the markets where your actual additional value add are going to be more. But most SMEs, I find, real and mid-market organizations will actually have a better value point to a larger organization, because you don't have the level of overheads that they have to have, the corporate governance, the shifting of money around the place, and whatever it is they need to do to stay competitive. So you can do it. You can also mobilize a lot quicker. Yeah. So focus on mobilization, focus on being able to deliver. And actually, when you're doing maybe the pitch, is that the A team that you pitch with is actually one that turns up. So there's a huge number of different ways that SMEs, and I think, G Cloud is by far and away, followed by its sister in DOS, the most SME friendly framework in the UK. I mean, it's 40% goes directly to SMEs. So you think a huge amount also will go through the supply chain as well, compared to 10% for the rest of all the other CCS frameworks. So, there's an enormous amount. Do not think that you're going to be beaten on price because someone's larger than you. And if you know that you're up against someone who's on price, go and check their G Cloud listing, how much they're charging, and making sure that you're able to offer milestone-based payments, things like that. You could be even if we get in early, we'll give you, you give us a bit more money. I don't know. There's all sorts of creative ways that you can do that. But some of those organizations, because of their structure and because of the way that they're made up, they can't offer those because of governance. So, be nimble, be flexible, and keep an eye on your competitors' pricing as well.
Nice. I think, pricing and those changes are quite interesting. And I guess the final thing here, the changes, Anna, are the, climate metrics and social value. If you have a couple of points on this, just to wrap up this section, since this is your area of expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely something as an organisation that we're supporting businesses with. So especially on the kind of PPN 0621, which is the carbon reduction plan requirement, and then social value PPN 0620. I think it's my recommendations would be to start early if that's a requirement. I know that it's being introduced into lot 1A and B, so it'll be new to some organisations. From the perspective of the carbon reduction plan, I would just say it's not as scary as it sounds. It's a lot of kind of language and things like that might be familiar, might be unfamiliar. But I think it's, from what we're seeing, because as I mentioned earlier, we're working not just with the businesses who are being asked to report against these procurement notices, but also with predominantly kind of local governments who are trying to implement better carbon insights through their supply chains. I think it's something that's going to become, it's going to touch more organisations. So we're going to become more as standard. And I think it's at the moment the criteria is, do you have one? I think eventually it'll be kind of demonstrate progress against it, and there might be scoring against that as well. If we look to kind of NHS procurement, that has been in place for a lot longer for all contracts. So I think we can kind of look to some of those things as a kind of example of how this will probably be adopted over the next kind of few years as a kind of more standard requirement. So it very much kind of then folds into the cost of business. But I think the message I share to organisations who are potentially a little bit worried about that is that all of the data that you need to be able to fulfill those requirements is data you already have. So it's just about gearing it and orienting it in a way that's being requested of you, and knowing the value of that data that you already have in house.
Nice. I'm sure it's not the last we'll be hearing about the carbon reduction plans and social value, as it seems to be quite in our face for G Cloud 15. But Just in the interest of time, I know we've only 4 minutes left. I just wanted to open up the Q&A. We've had 16 questions come in, I believe. This is being recorded for anyone on the call, but we can work our way down through a couple of these. So, Anna, Chris, if you see anything here you'd like to jump in and answer, feel free. Let's have a peek. Any recommendations on where to get a realistic perspective on how G-Cloud buyers actually use the framework rather than how CCS envisages? Chris, do you have any recommendations here?
We've got plenty of knowledge articles on our website, but I mean, in the vast majority, and our experience here is that G-Cloud is used for direct awards, so it's all about the supplier going to the buyer and saying, this is how you buy our stuff if you want to buy it. All right. Now, I would say probably out of the procurements that we've run, it's been 8 out of 10 of those have been outside, but there's still 20% that will follow a sifting route. Okay. So, I think that is my realistic perspective, is that, the vast majority of the stuff here is done through direct award. The way that public contracts regulations, I'm sorry, I'm trying not to take too much time here, contract regulations and the new PA 2023 is set up is that frameworks don't have to publish direct award information, all right, and the reasons for. So there'll be a more increased use of frameworks, because otherwise they're going to be seriously mired down in transparency. So that's my realistic perspective, but I'm sure there's plenty of other articles out there.
Nice. Of course, whoever asked the question can always reach out to you directly or reach out to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a chat.
So Anna as well. For this question here, whoever asked it, feel free to reach out to us directly and we can get into it. Keep moving on. Do you think CCS can actually effectively score on price quality across all listings? If there are anything, it's a chunky one.
They're automating it. They've got an automation tool for it. Yeah.
Okay. Good to hear. Let's keep going. Dubious contract awarding practice. Ooh, sounds scary. Best way to approach these scenarios. Is this something that they're also dealing with for G-Cloud 15, Chris, to your knowledge, or are dubious awarding practices still ongoing?
I don't quite understand what that means. You probably need a bit more context on that.
Maybe that is one to reach out as well. To us. If we don't apply now to G-Cloud 15, can we apply at a later stage? Yes, it's turned into an open framework, so there will be an opening, but of course, best to get involved earlier rather than waiting to get visible and hum in a pitch. The automation tool will actually work. Maybe you can reach out to Chris directly for that. There are many questions directed to CCS. We're just on time. Well, maybe this one, if it can be one that you can cover, Anna, just before you wrap. Many questions, some confusion, concern, frustration, and I guess what are your thoughts on this, and where would you go for, clarity and answers coming towards G-Cloud 15?
Yeah, I think there's the classic kind of inquiries process that's available. I think I can talk on mid-December or something like that. One of the things that we found really valuable was tapping into our network of organisations who were already listed on G-Cloud frameworks and asking for their input and experience as well. There's kind of friendly peer organisations, not direct competitors, potentially kind of partner organisations. Because I think there's one thing kind of seeing it in writing, and there's also another thing of kind of being able to hear about the experience of having gone through similar processes that were really valuable. So that's something that we found just kind of gave confidence and clarity over some elements that were a little bit grey for us.
Nice. Okay. Thanks so much. Look, I think we're a minute over time. I know we had a bit of a rushed Q&A there, but I felt that the fireside chat and the Q&A were quite interesting. Fireside chat in particular. Chris and Anna, thank you so much for your time today and for hanging around and sharing your experience with our audience. I think at one stage we got up to 150 people with regard to the attendees, which is a really great turnout. We'll have a recording of this, and for anyone still on the call, do reach out to us at Stottles, to Anna at Cloud Essentials, and to Chris at Advice Cloud. with any questions, we're all very open and happy to answer. But yeah, Chris, Anna, thank you both so much for joining. And yeah,
Been a pleasure. Thanks, guys. Good luck. Really, thanks for having us. See you soon. Good luck, everyone.
Best of luck.